Good evening, everybody. It's a privilege to be asked to address you today. As you remember, we started the week, Ashley Stevens talked about the mechanics of licensing, what made up the parts of a licensing. Yesterday, Dick Cahoon carried on from there and talked about how to organize the licensing tech transfer activity on the campus inside a tech transfer office. I'm going to talk about a soft skill that I think is absolutely critical if you're going to be successful in this activity. That is the ability to communicate. And the ability to communicate means both to justify the existence of the office, set expectations, get your faculty involved and engaged, convince the senior management that the activity can enhance the reputation of the institution. For government, such activities fulfill the government mandate, and to convince corporations that engagement can increase their market penetration and profitability. You saw my background. I simply want to add that my first licensing deal was to spin a company out of the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada in 1980, a startup company. Since then, I've negotiated 240 license agreements and an additional 40 spin-out companies. So that's my background. The topics I'm going to cover are here. Next slide. I'm going to talk about how to communicate the impact. And I want to explain, first of all, a small definition issue. In the United States, we tend to use the term technology transfer. And historically, that has meant the commercialization of patented inventions. And over the last decade, that's being broadened to the commercialization of many other forms of intellectual property, trade secrets, software, tangible intellectual property like monoclonal antibodies, genetically modified mice, etc. In the United Kingdom, the Brits realized earlier than we did that the jargon was critical to communicate the purpose of the office. And so they started using the term knowledge exchange, knowledge transfer to cover the entire gambit of intellectual property. Something that we in America are now transitioning towards. So how do you communicate the impact? First of all, you reach out and start talking to people. Next slide. The way you communicate the impact, I have found, first of all, that nobody's interested in the mechanics of disclosures, patenting, licensing, all those jargonish words are not the words that I use to begin the conversation. I get to the jargon later. What I find is important is to engage the audience to show them the benefits of participating in academic tech transfer. So for the researchers, I tell them I could help them accelerate their research career, as you see in the first bullet. For the leadership of the institution, engagement with this activity can enhance the reputation of the institution by showing to everybody that the institution is engaged with real problems. That's a fundamental reason to create and fund a tech transfer office. As far as the local community is concerned, engagement, they will see spin-out companies that begin to help enhance the local economic development. This is important for the local community to understand what the institution is doing. And then for government, we communicate to them that the institution is responsive to the mandate of government to get engaged for the betterment of people in the society. For government, it's useful to show funders what we're doing in that together we're helping create an innovation ecosystem. All of the above are reasons to finance and sustain budget for a tech transfer office. Next slide, please. Okay, talking to potential licensees. Why should they be interested? Well, innovative research can lead to innovative products that will help the company enhance market penetration and increase profitability. And also, as you see here, address ways to manage risk of product development by having a product that is new to the market that causes interest in the company's products. The leadership, I've communicated that. Also for researchers, the best way to communicate is now that they're engaged and understand some of the benefits, explain what the process is, the timing of the process. This does take time, and how being engaged helps them access external resources. And finally, a very important point. You see here on the last bullet point, the largest economies in the world: America, China, Germany, Japan. India is the 5th largest, and the United Kingdom. Now, all of them currently have well-established, effective academic tech transfer commercialization activities which communicate to their innovation-fueled growth. India needs sustained government support to compete in this arena. This is an area of important activity that India can get up to speed and continue to play in the big leagues in this area. Next slide. Okay. Once faculty or leadership are interested, understand the benefits, it's a case of, okay, what do we have to do to make all of this happen? That's the purpose of the slides that now follow. Next, please. This is an important graphic taken from the publication that you see at the top. You can find it on the European Commission website. It was created by Dr. Kevin Cullen, a tech transfer professional, when he was at the University of Edinburgh. And it shows how on the extreme left, people undertake research, and then how the results and the knowledge flow out to and benefit the community. And I'm going to talk about this in a little bit of detail, in that the second vertical column, research outputs, are the forms that the research can take as it moves off campus. The KT knowledge transfer channels are the written contractual ways in which these activities happen, and I'll delve into them a bit more in just a moment on the next slide. You'll see the importance there. The next slide, the users are those who accept the research results and put them to use in a variety of ways. And then the impact on the extreme right shows how you can measure the importance and the impact of all of this activity. This is the next slide. The vertical column of channels, Professor Cullen dug into each of the written contracts to determine how many contracts there were in each of these activities and how much cash was associated with the contracts. What he found was the bulk of the knowledge transfer, in other words, 57% of it occurred via contract and collaborative research. The teaching of courses and consultancies added another 30%. And lo and behold, the type of activity we're engaged in, intellectual property-based commercialization, amounted to a whopping 2%. So all of a sudden, it's important for everybody to realize that what we're doing is important, but only in the overall scheme of things. So Kevin Cullen did this study, published it for the United Kingdom. And then he moved to Australia. And what he found in Australia was he did this a similar study and got the same results. So all of a sudden, he came to the conclusion that knowledge transfer from a campus, looking at the research results, the bulk of that occurred outside the intellectual property commercialization that we're talking about. So that should set the expectations of what we are engaged in. But as he pointed out, it is the sole activity that is focused on creation of new products that actually benefit people. Next slide. Kevin then made the following observation, which you see here. And the trick is, well, which 5% of everything going on is actually the important stuff? And he then thought, it's important for the university to be engaged in not only cherry picking, but also other inventions whose true potential is too early to sort out. Lita Nielsen, when she was director of the MIT office, told our community that much of the research done and much of the inventions disclosed were probably 5 years ahead of industry's ability to understand and incorporate it into new products. So the impact for her was that she engaged in patenting 20% more of the inventions than she thought were actually ready for marketing, and the understanding that their time would come in the next 5 years. Next slide. Now, in that same publication is a very, very informative paragraph, which you see here. It is the understanding that everyone looks to the tech transfer office and says, what are you doing for us today? And the answer is, we're doing only as much as we're allowed to do inside the institution. If the institution supports this type of activity, sets the policy, leadership, regards the activity as acceptable and worth doing creatively, then all of a sudden magic happens. So the performance of the tech transfer office is largely reliant on the environment created inside the institution itself. It's not only the efforts of the office itself, but the innovation environment on the campus created by the leadership that is critically important to the productivity of the office. Next. I'm going to now move into more specific items of how to communicate. Okay, these are tools I've found very useful over the years. Next slide. This was taken from the Stanford University Tech Transfer Office a number of years ago, and is their way to communicate the cycle of innovation or the commercialization process. You can see it starts with people on campus doing research. A small portion, usually no more than 15 or 20% of the faculty are interested and engage in disclosing an invention disclosure. Then the office gets involved with assessing the disclosure and its appropriateness. Is it ready for marketing, or is it too early because there's still too many unknowns? The next activity in the assessment is, what is the intellectual property? Let's define it. Let's figure out how to protect it. Then, assuming that the project is ready for marketing, the marketing begins with creating a list of companies to be approached and discuss the opportunity with them. I have found it requires phoning and talking to at least 5 companies before one company says, yeah, I'm kind of interested. Let's talk. America has done studies on the activity in the US and found that if you're lucky, you will have one company interested in a license discussion. And both Kathy Koo at Stanford and Lita Nielsen have said, we understand we have a red hot property, a really interesting property if we have two companies involved. This, of course, doesn't apply to non-exclusive licensing or the licensing out of research tools like antibodies. So the next step, selecting, is the negotiation process itself. Frankly, it's quite straightforward. The terms are used very commonly. The numbers or the milestones or the amount of the upfront are what is negotiated within certain limits. Then the commercialization process occurs. This occurs inside the company, which may invite your researcher to participate via consultancy to help, and then bluntly, in my view, stay out of the way as the company moves product development into a product, then into the marketplace. Once in the marketplace, there's compensation that comes forward in terms of royalties or other aspects. And I'll describe later on how the compensation can be structured from the earliest stage. Next, please. Now, in order to communicate, I have found it useful to categorize each and every disclosure, each and every project I found in the office, and put them into a bucket and label the buckets. You see here, you get a disclosure. That's 0. You begin the evaluation, figure out what the IP is, and begin its protection. That's bucket number 1. And onward to bucket 2, bucket 3, 4. You come to a point, frankly, where the bucket might be filled with inactive projects because there's no interest in the marketplace. It's much too early in the marketplace. The faculty member researcher leaves the institution, moves somewhere else. And then there are those that, frankly, are dead because in some cases they've been in the marketplace as a product and then been superseded by something better, cheaper, etc. So the categorization is important, and I'll show you the importance on the next slide, please. It's a little bit hard to see, but effectively, on the extreme left, each project is put into a market categorization. The one at the top is education, then pharma, medical devices, information technology, and then a bucket for other. These are categorized number 3 buckets. So you're talking to a company. The potential licensee is listed on the next column. The particular market application, what the product might look like, what it might do, is the next column. And then what you see is columns that indicate it's pre-licensing, you're negotiating, nothing's been signed yet. Then finally, you move from pink to blue, where the license is indeed signed, product development occurs inside the company. Then, hopefully, the product moves into the marketplace, has a life cycle, and then the life cycle comes to an end. And you can see under the pharmaceuticals, the last entry is our famous Taxol deal, which got into the market. Our technology was used to produce the molecule for 9-10 years. And then the company Bristol Myers Squibb moved to a new technology. And our license became dead. And we moved to the market, and there were no more royalties. However, we had a very successful presence in the market for a good number of years. So with a chart like this, you can explain to whoever the audience is what this process is all about, the steps you have to go through. You can talk about the time it takes. In the pharma area, product development will take much longer than, say, in the IT or software area. You can then pinpoint a particular project, explain where it's been, where it is, and where it might go. And at the very top, a little hard to read, but inside the arrow is a compilation of the numbers of projects in the office, so people have an understanding of the volume of this activity. So this is a management tool. And it's, as I said, it's very easy to explain to anybody what's going on without a lot of jargon. And I've been into departmental meetings explaining. Faculty have looked and seen colleagues in other departments with projects. This has engaged them and say, I think maybe it's time for me to disclose what I'm doing and have a talk with you. And that's part of the outreach and the communication, get engagement. The next slide. This was a little hard to read, but effectively what it is, you see in the central block of columns with the raised cap in the middle. What you need to look at is in the center block, 3 columns adjacent to each other. And those represent a fiscal year. And then the 3 columns next to it on the right, the next fiscal year. And then the next fiscal year, the next fiscal year. What's the purpose of this? Let me describe each of the 3 columns in the fiscal year. The first one is money received. The second one is external money received via grants in the conversation with the company or through the license or through the option to a license. The last one in the 3 is other benefits that accrue. This might be equipment donated. This might be students hired. And so once a license or an option to a license is signed, this is given to someone in the office who goes and looks through the license to see what the commitments are. This is not an estimation of what eventual royalties might look like. This is a commitment of the license fee up front, milestone payments on certain dates, equipment donated, as I've said, or the fact that the licensee and the university have gone off to the national government for a grant to support the work. That's the central column. So this chart was prepared 10 years after I set up the office at Florida State University. And the bottom line below the chart is the benefits, tangible benefits that have accrued before the flow of significant royalties occur. What I mean by that is before the product is in the market and royalties based on sales begin to flow. And so anytime I've talked to senior management at the university, it's, gosh, John, this takes a very long time. My answer is, yes, it does. But look at the tangible benefits that accrue earlier on as our activity in the Office of Research helps the Vice President of Research build the research base of the campus. The degree of success of the product is totally out of the control of the university. The university has nothing to do with it, frankly. It depends entirely on the skill set of the licensee and the timing in the market itself. But such a chart is a tool to convey this simply, tangibly, and auditably to people that might be interested in it. Next slide. Now, these 2 graphics are taken from the Autumn website. The graphic on the left, the circle, as you can recognize from the Stanford graphic, is a statement of the transactions that occurred inside the United States in fiscal year 2023. Okay, you go around the top, 104 billion in R&D that led to 25 disclosures that year received by the roughly 190 institutions that report regularly to Autumn. You then have the evaluation stage, 25,000 disclosures, some of which lead to the 14,000 patents filed. And obviously, some of the 14,000 are disclosures received in the prior year, which didn't get filed until the next fiscal year. Sometimes you get a disclosure the last day of the fiscal year. Well, you put the disclosure in the fiscal year, but the patenting won't occur until the next fiscal year. That's a bit of timing. Then obviously from all of this activity, you get granted US patents. And over a couple of years prior to 23, there were 7,300 US patents granted in the fiscal year of 23. We tend to follow the national filings. It's fairly rare that an office has sufficient resources to file internationally by itself. Sometimes, if we were doing a spin-off company, I would routinely file a PCT and pay for it. And that would become a further hard asset for the spin-out because I knew it would take time before the full cost of the national filings outside the United States would occur, and the company would figure out where it wanted to foreign file and how to pay for that. Continuing around the cycle, you see here 9,000 licenses or options executed and signed in that particular fiscal year. That's a fair number. Again, this is over roughly 200 institutions. All of this activity in the fiscal year we're talking about, and prior to it, products are being developed. And in the 2023 fiscal year, 714 products entered the marketplace, not from the university, but from the companies. Then you see the number of startups formed in that fiscal year. So of the 90 to 199 licenses and options to licenses, roughly 10% of them were to spinouts. Over the years, the spinout numbers as a percent, 10 years ago was roughly 14%. It's now up into the 20% range. Okay, and so there's a little bit of a discrepancy here. Also in the chart, Adam decided to put the number of spinouts that still exist since the beginning of reporting in the 1990s. You see a substantial number of these spinouts. This is a very tricky number because some of them exist on their own. Some of them exist, but they've been bought and merged with larger companies, and we lose sight of them. So this is a pretty soft number. To give you an idea that this activity is a significant activity in America and has been for a number of years. That's the graphic on the left. On the right-hand side is a compilation of cumulative numbers over 25 years, from 1996 to 2020, it says. A study was done, gets updated every couple of years or so, and the question is asked, okay, here are the autumn numbers. It's handed over to a group of traditional economists who are then asked to do economic studies. So the numbers that you see here are not the ones that we boast about. These are numbers created by real full-time professional economists, and therefore are comparable with other economic measures. You see tremendous $1 trillion of contribution to US gross domestic product, number of job years created, 6.5 million, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And on the extreme lower right, the number of drugs and vaccines developed through public-private partnerships since the Bayh-Dole Act. A tremendous impact. Turns out, a study was done inside the FDA of how many innovative new drugs, not generics, innovative new drugs, were based on inventions at universities. Answer, roughly 20% over a 12-year period of the measurement of the study. A significant contribution to the welfare of people in America and outside America as these drugs are sold internationally. Okay, so again, these are tools to explain without a lot of jargon the impact of what's going on. All right, next slide. Okay, Premnath obtained this from MIT. And as you can see, it's the same sort of format. I'm going to tell you an interesting story here. Everybody knows about MIT and how good it is, et cetera, et cetera. It's one of the global standards of technology transfer. A little side note. In the early 80s, the MIT office, the professionals consisted only of lawyers. And there were few deals done because the lawyers were intent on protecting the university, as well as transferring, but really protecting the university. The vice chancellor of research at the time had the head of the Stanford office, Niels Reimers, come across the country and over a 6-month period, figure out how to improve the office and see what could be done. His first recommendation was fire the lawyers. And everyone was startled. And basically, that's what happened. And his recommendation was not only fire the lawyers, but replace them with MIT graduates who had business experience. So the lawyers, MIT helped them join law firms because they were highly skilled, frankly, but weren't the right people for what needed to get done. John Preston, an MIT graduate who had founded a company, was invited to come in, restructure the office, get it going. And after 4 years, it was up and running and producing more deals than had been done previously. And his number two, a woman who had been working in industry, he had intrigued into the office, and she took over to run the office for the next several decades, Lida Nielsen. So my point is, even the very best run into bumps on the road and learn and figure out that it's not quite working. What do we need to do? And therefore change and improve and move forward. So what's the lesson? The lesson is get started, get the right people, provide some budgetary security for a number of years, get going, and then take a look to see whether things are happening as you want them to happen. And if not, change. There are similar stories, to be perfectly honest, at Columbia. It was a modest, in the 80s, a fairly modest type of operation with a few people. Then they decided that they wanted to do this type of activity as part of the creative base of what was happening in the university and ramped up productivity. Wisconsin, which had been doing licensing for 100 years, they started off with an invention 100 years ago. And they made it widely available. This was the era of the snake oil pharmaceutical salesman. And so there were people that took their Wisconsin invention, which was the protection of vitamins in pasteurized milk. You have to heat it up and that destroys the vitamins. Wisconsin figured out how to protect the vitamins. So you made vitamin enhanced milk. What was the benefit? Well, there was a childhood disease called rickets that killed kids. The vitamin enhanced milk got rid of rickets as a disease in the United States. Well, many of the licensees claimed they followed the Wisconsin procedure, but they didn't. They were selling ordinary milk and nothing happened. Wisconsin realized its brand name was being taken in vain. And so they decided, okay, enough of this. And they did something very unusual. They took people to court and all of a sudden cleaned up the shysters. And those who agreed to license and follow the procedure were given the right to say vitamin enhanced milk as created by a process invented at the University of Wisconsin. Rickets cases plummeted. But the university, way back 100 years ago, realized that there was some enforcement that had to occur. But again, that was a long ago time when pharmaceutical snake oil was quite prevalent, not no longer the case. All right, next slide. Premnath obtained this from Oren Huskovitz at Columbia, and it's the pipeline of activities that show on the extreme left the large amount of research that leads to disclosures, that leads to patent filings. It's the same sort of autumn graphic done for one university, only Oren went a little bit further and said, you know, how many invention disclosures do we get for $10 million of research expenditures? RE on the box on the right. Okay, how many new products come from that? Well, pretty small number. How many new startups? Fairly small number. And most of the licensing it was done to small and medium-sized enterprises. Across America, a study was done that found that 20% of licenses in any year went to startups. Roughly 30% of licenses went to multinationals, and the remaining 53%, or the bulk, went to small and medium-sized enterprises, which in America are companies of 500 employees or smaller. So this is indicative not only of a major research institution, but also of this type of activity in America. Now, if you're in India and want to compare yourselves to a peer in the United States, do not pick Columbia, Cornell, MIT, Harvard, Wisconsin, Stanford. Why? These organizations got into this game 40 years before you did. So you're going to be playing catch up right from the beginning. So if you're going to pick a comparable, do so quite thoughtfully. Someone that's not been in the game as long as these folks have. These numbers are significant. Why? Because they've had their bumps on the roads early on and sorted out what to do, and now have large, well-oiled machinery cranking out disclosures, getting faculty engaged, excited about being involved, and then leading to a significant volume of opportunities passed to companies that do product development, take things into the marketplace. Next slide. Again, same sort of pipeline. Well, you take a look at some of the numbers. Oren did a study. 1 in 6 inventions ever gets licensed. 1 in 6 only gets licensed. Good Lord, that's 16%. That's not very high. As was discussed earlier this week, 50% of the inventions get patented. Well, that means there's a whole lot of patents that don't go anywhere that the university's paid for. So you've got to be fairly selective. But again, Oren did a study, and I'll show you in a minute, where you can't tell whether you've got a blockbuster on your hand at the beginning. You won't know until the market responds, and that takes time. So look, again, in the middle, roughly 1 in 100 pharma compounds gets approved. 1 in 100, 1%. And then roughly 1 in 10 venture investments is a significant hit. Spinouts. So, holy smokes. You have to want to do this. You have to have a pipeline of opportunities, and you have to be prepared to spend money, to invest in the hope that some of these products merit being developed into products in the marketplace and that they are successful, and the royalties and other compensation returns covers some of the costs. Okay, Ashley Stevens did a study with colleagues that showed in America, after 30 odd years or so, less than half of the tech transfer offices were anywhere near financial self-sufficiency. Never mind profitability, self-sufficiency. And you have to be very careful because the costs of the office include patents. And you have to be very careful to explain to the leadership that these patent expenses aren't office expenses. They are an investment on behalf of the institution that will take time to come to fruition if they do. So the costs of the office then become the salary costs, the operating costs, and in addition, the investment costs of the patents. If you try and look at the patent and operating costs together, you're not going to get near self-sufficiency for a long, long time, simply because of the way you've done your arithmetic. Next, please. Okay, Oren did a study on his campus and basically said, how long does it take from a disclosure until we get a license? Well, for roughly, I think, 32 years of operations, they did this study that showed that only a little bit more than half of the licenses get done by 3 years after the disclosure. 85% get done 6 years after the disclosure. That means 15% of the licenses don't get done until 7 years or later. Well, this takes a tremendous amount of time. Obviously, software deals get done fairly quickly. The pharma and biotech, medtech take a lot longer. But again, this is a typical of a major, well-run office that's in the capital of the financial center of the United States after 30 years of effort and the bumps on the road and with the right staffing. So this is a hard, tough game. It takes time. Now, America published its metrics ever since 1990. Remember, war's been in the game more than 100 years. Ashley then went over and studied and found that the percent disclosures that get into the marketplace are less than 5%. Royalties, cumulative royalties for any project over $1 million in America, less than 2%. So as Lita, Kathy, and others have said, this is about impact, not income, because the income may or may not be there long terms. Next. This is myths as gathered by Premnath, and I agree with him. Tech transfer earnings can substitute grants and contracts. No, it cannot. Even some of the best get a return on their yearly R&D expenditures only 2 to 5% in terms of royalties and other compensation. It's pretty modest, frankly. There were days when you could put your cash into buying a bond that would return 5% risk-free, as opposed to this activity. Tech transfer is a commercial activity. No, it's not. I went into the MBA class at Florida State University, and the title of my talk was Tech Transfer as a Business. Diplomatically, I was laughed out of the room. Why? Well, as I knew, but the students told me, John, you have no control over what is disclosed to you. The people that disclose it don't report to you, so they may or may not be interested in helping you with commercialization. It's way too early to do any sort of analysis as the value, because you don't know whether this stuff will scale in the hands of your licensees. And I knew that because when we licensed our Taxol technology to manufacture the drug Taxol, the first version did not scale. It did not work in the hands of the Bristol Myers Squibb people. When I went to Bob Holton, the professor, I said, what's going on? Are these guys any good? And the answer from Bob was, John, the Bristol researchers, they're really, really good. The problem is the chemistry that worked in my laboratories does not scale. Okay, Bob, what do we do? We were fortunate in that he had another technology which we substituted in the license. That scaled wonderfully well, and the rest is history. $350 million in royalties that accumulated to Florida State, of which Professor Holton got 40 of 350 million. So he and the income tax people had a very interesting conversation, to say the least. So this is not a commercial activity because there's lack of control. The university don't have control over the product development, and the marketing is handed off to a third party. So it's not a commercial activity at all. The last myth, it distracts from teaching. No, it's a supplement. It's an interesting aspect of real world applicability that for those that are interested can get involved through a laboratory, or you can bring case studies into the classroom, MBA or chemistry or other the humanities, and show people how this type of activity works and enhances the preparation and the education of the students to become productive citizens when they graduate. Next slide. This is about the impact. And for a period of time, everyone was talking about impact by using stories. And someone finally said, okay, enough. These are one-off stories. Let's do a study as to the overall impact in the United States. So the autumn statistics over roughly 22 years were studied by a group of real live professional economists. And they came up with the following conclusions, okay, which you see here. These are big numbers over 22 years. Now, and as one little known fact is at the very bottom, which says that there is an assumption of the compensation is a 2% earned royalty rate. That's pretty indicative of pharma. It's a little low for medtech, but it's what was said. Now, the interesting thing is these are big numbers, but you have to realize that in the year that this was all normalized to 2012, the U.S. economy, well, in the current year, the U.S. economy is $19 trillion. So this impact of billions is significant, makes a difference, but it's still relatively modest. And when you get right down to it, of course it's modest. Why? Because that's not the purpose of the university. It's a spin-off subsidiary activity that, believe it or not, does have a very substantial impact on the economy. Okay, it's measurable, and therefore it's worth doing. Okay, let us get into the next slide, please. Case studies. Two things here. First of all, you can go to the bbc.com, British Broadcasting Corporation, and /invention. They've got a website where in the United Kingdom they did a competition. What was Britain's greatest invention? The population was asked to opine on it, and they came back with the vote of antibodies. No, antibiotics, sorry. Concrete, steam engines, and other amazing inventions were listed, but antibiotics was the big thing. So I'm going.
Mr. Fraser?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do we want to break for quiz before you get into case studies and stories? Would that be okay? Or should we wait?
Yes. No, it's a good time. Let's do that.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Requesting my colleagues to kindly share the QR code and the link in the chat box. The link is there in the chat box and the QR code is also getting loaded. Full screen, please. maybe we can have a couple of minutes to attempt the quiz,
The link
and
is
then
yet
we
to come
can
up.
take few questions.
Link is yet to come up in the chat box.
No, it has come. It has come.
Can you resend it, please? Because I'm not seeing it yet.
Okay, I think Mugdha has sent it again. You can check.
Has it been sent only to you? A mistake?
Yeah, I think.
Please send to the meeting.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there's a link on the chat box, and let's see it.
Yeah. Can you all see the link, please, and QR code? QR code is on the screen. Garima, can you just see on the screen, please?
All of you know, this is also meant as a quick attendance for those who are interested in certificates. So please do fill up the form, the quiz.
Okay, responses have started coming in. Can we
John,
just
would you like to finish this segment before I ask questions, or would you like to me to ask questions?
Why don't we take a couple of questions now, Pranath?
Sure. I'll just give Pragya 2 minutes to finish and
Sure.
start with
Yeah.
questions. Yeah.
Can we have the next slide, please? So while we all are attempting the quiz, here is a session for tomorrow, the last day. Tomorrow we are going to have 3 speakers, Dr. Anuradha Narasimhan, Dr. Premnath, and Dr. Arvind Chinchure, where they would be talking about technology marketing, which is very important for technology transfer and the institutional policies, which I'm very sure many academicians and scientists who have joined would be interested in. So stay tuned for tomorrow's session as well. I think we are good to take the questions now, sir.
Yeah, if you can just unshare, please. Yeah. Yeah. So let me just go with a few questions that have already come up. Others are welcome to please type it on the chat box. I'll try and take it up during the course of this as well. There's a question from Dr. Indrani Ghosh about how can TT professionals, how can they improve their communication and marketing skills along with their scientific backgrounds or IP backgrounds. They typically come from strong scientific or IP backgrounds. How do they go about increasing some of the other skills that are needed? And shall all our universities have these as combinatorial courses? Your suggestions?
Well, as I said in the panel the first day, the skill sets, communication, the ability to build relationships, and then the understanding of the mechanics. Most scientists are used to communicating to their peers. And so they use certain jargon and certain phrases, and people understand what they're saying. The communication skills I'm talking about are to different audiences that don't understand the science, don't understand the jargon. And so the skill that you have to develop is talking about the benefits of the activity to the audience that you're talking to, and then get into the mechanics a bit later. How to do this inside an office? Well, that's part of the hiring process. You look for people that have a bit of a business background, some experience, maybe in sales or working in a private company, the R&D bench even. But you also want people that can easily communicate the importance of what they're doing. In an elevator pitch, By that, I mean briefly, and to be perfectly frank, the standard that we use is we want people that can communicate as if they were in a high school grade 8 classroom and explain what this is all about and engage the kids. In other words, don't do a deep dive in the jargon. Talk about the benefits, give examples to engage people. And if you can do it at that age level, you can do it at any age level. So I look for those skill sets when I hire people. That's how you get that skill in the office.
Yeah, there's a question about from Alexandra, which is about some of the when you presented some of the data on US universities. It says, I've read yesterday an article regarding US universities losing millions of dollars for inventions that are patented but do not reach the market. We all understand why we are here, but how do we provide further justification to say universities and institutions you're serving? How and why would it also be an opportunity for a private company versus university-based TTO to provide the same assistance to its stakeholders? John, I think while we presented the data, the overall impact on society from diffusional aspects, the diffusional impact of innovation, I think didn't probably come out. Would you like to talk about that as well?
Sure. I'll get into this later, but let me start now. There was a professor, Edwin Mansfield, one of the early speakers this week referred to him. He was at the University of Pennsylvania. And in the 80s and 1990s, he published papers that looked at what is the impact of research. And he came to a variety of conclusions. Number one, he studied 7 industries, the oil and gas industry, pharma, medtech, IT, et cetera. And what he found is over a 15-year period, roughly 11% of the new products introduced by all of these fields, 11% of the new products were based on academic discoveries. Okay, modest, but measurable. Okay, so then you look at, well, as Kevin Cullen said, only 5% of the disclosures are potentially commercially interesting. How do you pick the 5%? Well, you do more than 5%, and you hope that the market will recognize something. So you've got to invest. In the United States, we're fortunate enough to have an economy that allows significant investment in patents that may not be taken up immediately, but as Lita and Kathy have pointed out, they might be taken up 5, 6, 7, or 8 years later when there's still lots of patent life. So that there's a tremendous expenditure and not immediate licensing, but you create an inventory that could turn into a valuable cash flow potentially later. But you have to realize that you make some bets and you're going to lose some bets, that the products get to the market too late. They get into the market and someone else has come up with a product that is better, cheaper than yours. And so you're out of luck. So you've got to face up to the fact that some of the patent investment dollars will not generate a financial return. And so you must balance what you do given the resources that you're going to commit to the overall activity.
I think there are some more questions, but I think I'll let you continue and then we can come back later. Is that okay?
Sure.
Or would you like me to take some more questions?
Let's see, where are we now? Oh yeah, let's take a couple more.
Okay. I think one of the questions, which I'm just trying to pull out, Shovan Ganguly says, revealing data that impact is not monetary benefits to investors in university. Why is that marketed aggressively instead of some numbers which are emotionless?
I didn't understand that at all.
I think the impact, which is not necessarily in terms of immediate monetary benefits, why is that not being marketed aggressively instead of some numbers which are presented, which he's saying are emotionless?
I will say that our community, early on, when asked, what's the impact of what you do? When the big bosses that sign the checks that pay our salary asked, what are you doing? The answer that our community gave consistently was, well, we file so many patents, we do so many deals. And everybody looked at it, that's not a very good answer. And so the community accepted that we needed to have stories as well as the numbers. That was better because it showed what the human impact was. And then Edwin Mansfield showed that, okay, a company takes a license and a company does R&D. Company introduces the product into the marketplace. How does it get a return on its financial investment? The answer was the return that occurs in the society, the company only captures 25% of it. 55% and more are diffused throughout the society. And they are benefits, impact not captured by the company itself, but benefiting others. So all of a sudden, you realize, wait a minute, the university can generate these ideas, pass them to companies that expend a lot of money, put them into the marketplace, and they get a good return on their investment, but there's a huge impact that's not captured. This is what Edwin Mansfield showed, 20, 30 years ago. And so part of the issue is that our community's not been very good about communicating the larger impact of what actually is going on. We've been focused on our own jargon, our own numbers. And so we're improving greatly by adding the stories. But Mansfield, Edwin Mansfield's graduate students were not picked up. And this field of measuring the impact did not become the broad academic study that I think he hoped it would become. So we're losing a lot of our ability to capture the impact of what we do. He's passed away now.
Yep. John, maybe this might be a good place to also talk about probably your Better World project and how you're communicating impact through that. Or do you have some slides coming up?
I've got a couple of slides coming up.
Okay.
So why don't
maybe
we go back?
We'll go back to the slides now. Yeah. Request the team to please put up the slides.
Yep. Thank you, Premnath. Next slide. Now, I'm going to be talking about case studies and stories. And what you have here are three URLs. The top one is a database created in the Autumn website of stories gathered largely of American products that made it into the marketplace. I led the committee that created the Better World project because I realized that we were only communicating via the numbers what the benefits and impacts were. We were missing the emotional impact of the stories. And so the Better World project, whose URL is here, has 600 stories. Right? That's a modest number given that the stories have been forthcoming since the mid-90s. There should be thousands of stories, but we've only captured 600 so far. So there's lots of room for improvement. But I made it as part of my committee to gather stories from outside the United States. There are stories from Chile, some from India and elsewhere that you can find. You go here, you have a search engine that will take you into the stories by market, by institution, by technology. And each of the stories was written by a science writer. So the mandate was minimize the scientific jargon, explain the benefits to the people, and each of the stories is about a page long. The lower URL, Impact Awards Coffee Table Books. This is a URL to 2 volumes. I'll show you a couple of examples of stories from India. Technology transfer done inside the country, where stories similar to the Better World Project were gathered together by the Sadhguru Management Group of Hyderabad and published in a hard copy coffee table book. And I'll show you examples of this. So those are the 2 databases that I know of. There are a few others. The Brits have done some gathering of stories as well. That's a different story. The one in the middle is a video that I will, we've agreed that we'll play this in a minute. And it shows the power of communication visually rather than the written word. What if you did a video of the inventor talking about how they came about to invent something, what the benefits were, and then you show an actual example of the invention being used? This will have an amazing impact. So I pass to you the idea within your own tech transfer office. If you're in a research organization, say a university, you could probably get a group of students who would love to do vignettes or podcasts or short videos of 30 seconds or probably 3 minutes, like the one I'm about to show you, whereby these communication tools can be sent off to companies who can click on it and in 3 minutes decide, ooh, this is interesting. This fits with what we strategically are interested in. I'd like to follow up and talk to the tech transfer office. And so the visual impact is another way to communicate. You can do it fairly inexpensively. So we're about to show you the video, but I need to explain the background. This is an invention for premature infant babies. Turns out, if your baby's born prematurely, it lacks certain skills. It cannot feed itself by sucking. Okay? So the premature baby goes into the intensive care, the neonatal intensive care unit, where it's handled by nurses. The baby's anxious. The parents, of course, are just totally upset with the whole thing. They're very, very worried. It turned out that the baby trying to feed itself sucks, okay, and its mouth moves in certain random ways. Well, Jane Stanley at Florida State University in the music therapy department discovered that if you created a nipple, a plastic nipple, that could detect the sucking movement of the baby's lips, if the baby randomly started sucking properly, if you had the mother's voice in an electronic device reinforcing that sucking motion, the child would learn this is the way to feed themselves. It's Pavlov's dog's response, okay? And when Jane created a prototype and went to the neonatal units conferences across the country, the nurses were frantic. They needed it. They understood instantly the impact it would have on the parents, on the baby, on the costs, and just, they were thrilled. So let's click and listen for the 3 minutes and hear the rest of the story. We had this working properly before we started this morning. So a little tiny, here we go. Here we are.
It's said music can heal the soul, At Florida State University, a professor has developed a musical device to help premature babies grow and become healthy.
And it seems the problem is when the babies are born very early, the neurological system is too immature to support independent feeding.
As babies suck on the pacifier-activated lullaby device, or PAL, they get a musical reward in the form of a lullaby.
When the bell breaks
The soothing lullaby encourages the infant to continue to suck, essentially teaching the child to eat.
So we feel like we're accomplishing two major milestones. Music is an incentive. It's pleasant to the baby. They will suck a great deal more in order to listen to the music, and that transfers to a feeding skill, and they almost immediately go to independent feeding, sometimes with as little as 15 minutes of training, which is kind of a miracle when you consider how big this problem is.
Okay, are you ready?
Nurses at Tallahassee Memorial Hospital's neonatal intensive care unit use the device daily. Babies using the device get bigger, stronger, and ultimately make the trip home much faster.
And what we've seen is the babies that use the PAL, that they become used to that non-nutritive sucking. They're ready to eat sooner. They go home from the hospital sooner. They tolerate their feedings better. They're great.
And for parents who are spending day in and day out in the NICU, the PAL device gives them comfort and helps them stay tied to their baby's progress.
It helps strengthen their muscles so that when they latch on to the nipple or to the bottle, they can hold on for longer and feed for, the whole bottle, the whole feed.
Due to a life-threatening illness, Carlson's twins came 9 weeks early. Because they were early, they have stayed in the NICU for more than a month getting extra care.
So I've noticed in the past 2 weeks since they've been doing this, they're finishing bottles and we're actually starting to latch on to me, which is the end game.
While Carlson visits daily, nurses find with PAL, it gives mothers a chance to connect with their babies who so often stay in the incubators.
So this is a chance that while they've lost a lot of control, that at this point when they're able to come in and work with music therapy, with a PAL, with their little one, that they can begin to have that control back again and really be an active part of the recovery and the healing and the growth and development of their little one.
She can get big and smiley and goofy.
For this one family, they're happy to have the connection.
Anything to help Quinn and Rowan and make them stronger and get them, home sooner is, great.
Until recently, Dr. Stanley's device was only in use in Tallahassee. Now, thanks to an investment from Powers Device Technologies, the device is in mass production.
So it's very exciting to think that finally it will be available to all of the babies that need some help with this phase of their development in the NICU.
The pacifier-activated lullaby is now available to all hospitals nationwide and will soon be available to parents to help babies build strength and come home sooner. All thanks to a Florida State University professor who believes in the healing power of music.
I wanted everybody to see the video for a variety of reasons. It's a powerful way to communicate. It's a fairly inexpensive way to communicate. And as we all know, as was discussed earlier this week, various people listen and learn differently. Some like to read, some listen, and some a combination of both. Jane Stanley described the PAL device as a miracle. And when we came across it, in the office, we were just struck that this was something that we absolutely had to get into the marketplace. So it took 8 years. We went to a big incubator company, a baby incubator company. They were very interested. And as we were looking to negotiate a deal, they got bought by a much bigger company that said the financial return on the device wasn't sufficient to do the deal. So I thought, okay. Then we had a entrepreneur who was willing to invest in a startup company. And that got started. But the skill set of the entrepreneur wasn't sufficient to take it into the marketplace. And the whole company just came to a screeching halt. Then finally, a venture capital firm based in South Florida was approached and asked to take a look at it. The analyst looked at it and said, "Ooh, this is really interesting. There's an opportunity here." And as it turned out, the analyst said, "There's an opportunity for me in the company." So she arranged for an investment with the firm, announced that she would follow the investment and become the CEO. And because the firm thought very highly of this analyst, they thought, "Oh, this is great. One of our own people is going to follow the investment and make it happen." So finally, after 8 years, the company was formed. Powers was created. The investment company invested, and it took off. And independently, as you saw from the video, the nursing community was waiting anxiously for this device to come out of the marketplace. And so, boom, in it went. Now, what you saw was a white box. There's no radio waves involved. It's all hardwired. It had to be gone through very, very carefully because any type of electronic device in a hospital, particularly in the intensive care unit, had to be very carefully designed. We, in the tech transfer office, ran into one problem after another, but I have to tell you, this was a priority. This was a deal that was going to get done, no matter what the problems were. So for 8 years, this was a priority. Finally, it got into the marketplace, and we were incredibly pleased. And Dr. Stanley was very easy to work with. So again, the power of these case studies is able to help you communicate not only to the end company, but also to the leadership of your institution to show the creativity that's occurring that they may not be aware of, as well as show researchers how a colleague of theirs is taking something into the marketplace with our assistance. So these 3 URLs are active. You can copy them and follow them to your leisure. Next, please. Now, this is a snapshot of some of the story leads in the Autumn A Better World project. Some of them are quite high tech. There are agricultural stories, there are medical stories, there are pharma stories, there are IT stories. But as you can see, care has been taken to focus in on the human element. And each of them is carefully written to minimize the jargon and increase the impact. So that's the Better World database. Next slide, please. This is the front page of the Indian coffee table book created by the Sath Guru Consulting Management Group. That's the front page. The next slide, please. This is an example of an invention made in India, commercialized in India. And this is the format of the story. A picture, a discussion of various elements of interesting use. And the book is filled page after page after page, and this is available through Sath Guru. The next slide, please. This one, as a North American, I was quite intrigued with. The recycling of flower waste from places of worship. When I visited India, there were several instances where there were religious ceremonies underway in the city that I was visiting, and flowers were strewn everywhere. This is a project where the flowers on the road were picked up and recycled back into products for incense and other things, so that the waste turned into a beneficial product that brought income to the people who gathered, the road sweepers, and the company itself. So I was just fascinated, and I've got a copy of the book. I think they're still available to be bought fairly inexpensively. And it's just wonderful to see these fantastic stories laid out about how the creativity of Indian-based researchers has led to products that are put into product development and brought into the Indian market and then begin to spread further. So next slide, please. A little hard to read, but this is an article I wrote for LES Nouvelle, and it's entitled Measuring and Communicating the Value, Impact, and Benefits of Academic Commercialization. It was published in Les Nouvelles, March 2023, where, again, I capture much of what I've been talking about and make it available for wider distribution so that people can understand the benefits of what is going on. So next slide, please. Now, I promised at the beginning there would be 3 topics I would cover. Communication was the one I've just finished. Now we're going to talk about training professionals. This is fairly straightforward. And I think important. So the next topic, next slide. What I'm going to talk about, skill and capabilities, how you go about being credentialed and recognized for having the skill set, and how do you actually gain such experience? Next slide. Well, the skills and capability, in my view, start with the ability to communicate. Then there's the ability to build relationships. And usually at this point, when I make a workshop presentation, I stop, look at the audience and say, okay, those of you who are married, raise your hands. And the bulk of the audience raises their hands. And I say to them, the skill set that you and your significant other have in communicating and building a relationship, which may lead to children and supporting them as they grow and you grow together. There are many of those skills you use in a daily business in your relationship that you can use in the office to build a relationship with the faculty, with the leadership, and with the outside corporations. So keep that in mind. And then finally, how do you get skillful? Well, you get skillful by doing and taking courses and classes, specifically the skills you see listed there. And the last sentence is recognition. There are now certification methods for the knowledge transfer, tech transfer community. One is international, the RTTP, Registered Tech Transfer Professional. It's administered by ATTP, which is an organization of organizations. The organizations are national tech transfer associations in 14 countries that have come together. And one of the product offerings is the RTTP certification. And you can apply for it. You go to the website, find out what the eligibility criteria are. I was on the evaluation committee for 6 years, then asked not to be renewed to allow someone else to come in. Ashley Stevens then was appointed, and he currently is part of the evaluation committee. So questions to Ashley and I can help with this. This is a certification based on experience. The application consists of providing a 1,000-word essay of how you used the skills to solve a problem. And when I was on the committee, this was the key to certification, demonstrating that, yes, not only did you have the experience, but you use that experience to solve real problems, which you then describe. In addition, in the United States, there is what's called the CLP, Certified Licensing Professional Certification. This is a written examination to demonstrate the skills. You are asked a series of questions, you give an answer, and it's a pass-fail. In both cases, RTTP and CLP, if you are not approved on your first application or first test, you're given feedback. And you can then prepare yourself to reapply, hopefully pass. Then there are certain countries, Malaysia is one, that's looking to create a national certification for knowledge exchange tech transfer. So there are a variety of ways to be certified and have your skill set recognized as well. So the skill set also that you need that's not here is a soft skill, and that is the nature of our work in the office is we don't know what's going to come in as a disclosure tomorrow. And so the uncertainties of what you're going to be dealing with, you must enjoy that type of thing. On the panel Monday, there was a question of how the office staff were perceived elsewhere on the campus. And in my opinion, you need to be perceived as helping the faculty accelerate their research careers by accessing new partners, new monies, and new challenges, helping the leadership demonstrate the usefulness of the research institution in society in a variety of ways, not only producing highly qualified manpower as productive citizens on graduation, but also in the manner of helping companies introduce new products that benefit people into the marketplace. So again, the skills, capabilities are there. This is how you go about attaining them and being recognized. If you apply to the Oxford Auxentia Tech Transfer Office, they make it known that in order to be eligible to apply, you must be RTTP certified. Otherwise, your application will not be accepted. So this is a growing awareness. Next slide, please. Now, the last big component is IP management for professionals. Now, what does this mean? Well, the next slide, and I'll start talking about it. I've been asked to give a quick overview of the basics, focus on a couple of key issues, and talk about this. So the basics are pretty straightforward. There are the mechanics, inventions, creative works, which are copyright protected, usually not patent protected. Software, tangible IP like antibodies or genetically modified mice, databases of information, and as Dick has talked, plant varieties and seeds. And oh, here's a new word, social innovations. Now, let's talk about that for a minute. This is something that the people in the United Kingdom realized. There was creativity in non-STEM departments, okay? And so they said, how do we help bring the creativity off campus and influence society? Well, it turns out that researchers in the arts, humanities, and social sciences do the research by going into the community, discovering a problem, and helping address the problem. Okay, through education, real solutions. And so the Tech Transfer Office, the role of the Tech Transfer Office with these social innovations that have a social impact is not commercialization. It is rather working with the researcher to bring the solution found in one community to other communities. How do you spread the solution to other communities in a financially sustainable manner so that you don't spend all your time writing grant proposals to cover the costs. Okay. And what I found, most of the STEM material is technology push. That is, I have an invention, I think it'll solve a problem, and I'm looking to find out where the problem is so I can help solve it. The social innovations, on the other hand, are just the opposite. A real problem that exists in the community is addressed, partially solved. And the question then becomes, how do I scale this up? Very, very, very different dynamics. So to continue on, the methods of protection of the intellectual property, you see here, patents, copyrights, the retention of tangible intellectual property. Tangible IP, antibodies, mice, interesting materials. It's protected by the fact that I have it, you don't have it, but you want it, so I will agree to give it to you under certain written conditions. I will then physically hand it over to you. You will then attempt to commercialize it. If the commercialization fails, part of the agreement is you will give back to me what tangible IP you've created, and you will not use it further in the marketplace because you couldn't make it work. I'll try and find someone else to make it work. So unlike a patent or a copyright, the handling of tangible IP is very, very different. But when you look into the autometrics, you find a tremendous number of research products are handled in this manner. And so as much as maybe 40 or 50% of the deals done in the United States are of tangible intellectual property that is passed over physically. So next slide. Here we are again. Here's the tool that you see, management tool. This again helps you track portfolio management, helps you communicate how a particular project is advancing and how your office is advancing a number of projects simultaneously. And you can explain the process quite easily to somebody using this technique. So I have found this a very useful management tool, obviously, to help you with the portfolio management. And it also alerts you to the fact that you look and realize that certain projects don't seem to be advancing. And so you can focus in on the lack of progress and trying to understand what's going on. Next slide, please. Now, I was asked to talk about strategic management for optimal outcomes. Well, okay. There's the commercialization process. You get a deal done. And then there's the administration of agreements, something we've not talked about to a great deal. There are activities of infringement litigation. Whoa, that's not part of tech transfer. Oh, yes, it is. Turns out, if a product advances in the marketplace and is wildly successful, there will be imitators. There will be people that will infringe your product, like the Wisconsin example I gave 100 years ago. And so I'll talk about this in a bit of detail because these are important for the tech transfer office to realize that getting the deal done, the license done, is only the beginning of the journey that can last 10, 15 years, the length of the patent. And if there are trade secrets or trademarks involved or proprietary information, the relationship with the original research laboratory can continue beyond the patent life. So these can be very long-term relationships. Then again, the management, the gathering, communicating the metrics, the gathering, communicating the stories and the case studies are important aspects beyond simply generating the deals. Now, in this whole area, I was approached by my boss one year, and he said, how do you assess the success of the office, John, You tell me how you want to be assessed. So my response was, okay, look, I'd like you to talk to these half dozen researchers and ask them the same question. Then I'll give you 6 licensee companies to talk to and ask them the same question of how you assess success of the office. Of course, I provided my boss with the data, the stories, but I have to tell you, the VPR was very impressed when the stakeholders came back, sang our praises, certainly, but the companies in a very sophisticated way came back and said, the offices helped us get the documents through the university bureaucracy fairly promptly. We had an internal bureaucratic champion in addition to the researcher who was our technical wizard that we were really interested in. But in order to form a relationship, we had all the paperwork, and the tech transfer office facilitated that, made it happen, stepped in if there were glitches and problems. I also wanted the VPR to talk to a couple of companies that weren't terribly happy with the way things had turned out, so that he had a sense of what was going on. And after he'd done that, he came back and said, okay, I understand what you're doing. I understand how the office is doing it. And so I was then asked to make a presentation to the board of trustees that governed the direction of the university. And it was explained to them that this was another way in which the university's creativity could be of use to the taxpayers who were paying our salaries. And the board was quite intrigued. Obviously, I told some of the stories. Jane Stanley and the PAL device were one of them. They were absolutely fascinated by it all. So I think in addition, I'm looking at my notes here. Oh yeah, litigation, infringement. We at FSU had the Taxol deal wildly successful. Bristol faced a infringement case. So the university was engaged in the infringement. First of all, in the license, the basic document, we said if there is infringement, the company would recognize what was going on and would stand in front of us in the legal suit. We would participate, but we needed to have a mechanism to understand what this was all about. So in the infringement case, Bristol had their lawyers, we had our lawyers, we sat down and sorted out, okay, how are we going to create a strategy to win the case? Who's going to pay for it? And if we win, how are we going to divide up the settlement? And if we lose, how are we going to cover the sunk costs? In addition, it was made very clear to us by Bristol that there was going to be a tremendous amount of time demanded of our researcher. And Bob Holton committed to that. He went through 16 boxes of paper emails to understand and look at what was going on. He had to take time away from the research efforts, so he was not productive in that sense for 9 months. The case was settled without going to court, it turned out, because there was a lot of the lawyers argued back and forth, and the other side realized that they were indeed infringing, and if it went to court, they would lose. So rather than spend the money on a court case where they knew they were going to lose, they settled. And how do we pay? How do we divide up the settlement? Well, the costs were entirely covered by Bristol Myers Squibb. Professor Holton, if he had out-of-pocket costs, not his time, but out-of-pocket costs, that was covered by Bristol. The settlement? The settlement, in addition to the recovery of all costs of lawyers and blah, 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 and everything else, was $1. It sounded ridiculous, but that was the extent of it. So we took a dollar bill, cut it in half, and each of the parties took half, went home. So it turns out that infringement litigation, you have to do a lot of very, very careful thinking. You have to have a strategy. You have to have a work plan to cover who does what, who pays for what. Are you going to divide up whether you win or lose? And if you lose, the company has been paying, so it's their sunk costs. But your professor has lost a lot of research productivity for some significant time. Having the university involved in the lawsuit many times makes companies on the other side of the lawsuit very nervous. Because while the other side could point to Bristol Myers Squibb and say, these are terrible people doing terrible things, pointing at a university and accusing the university of being terrible people and doing terrible things, that's not going to win you publicity points. So having a university engaged can be very beneficial from just that viewpoint itself. So let's move on from there. Next slide, please. All right, I'm going to take a moment, and as I begin my wrap up, look at this actual case study. This is a case study of a consortium, a multi-party collaboration, and how you deal with ownership of IP that's generated during the consortium existence. So first point is a group of people get together, they submit a proposal, companies get on board, researchers get on board. The group approaches, say, the federal or state government for financing. The financiers get very excited about it. The work plan, which they then review, is quite straightforward. And the question is, who owns the intellectual property? What do we do about it? Well, the answer is, in addition to the research plan, you have to have a ownership of IP plan, both of IP that is created, which means you have to have a disclosure mechanism amongst all the organizations and evaluation, and then a use policy. Any participant in the consortium can use the IP internally, non-commercially, not exclusively. And if someone then decides, or two companies then decide they want to use it commercially, they ask for exclusive licenses. And you get two applications. And you kind of look at it and think, uh-oh, how am I going to resolve this? Well, there's a couple of ways. Turns out that you might have exclusive licenses that are specific. One license specific to a certain market, say veterinary animals, and the other market is human beings. You might have licenses that one license is specific to the Western Hemisphere, all countries in the Western Hemisphere, and the other license is the rest of the globe. There are ways to divide this up so that we had this occur, sorted it out, and then lo and behold, the two companies collaborated and they shared information of what they'd learned in their own markets back and forth so that they both benefited. This was a good solution. And again, it shows that no matter how sophisticated, complicated, there are ways to address issues in a straightforward manner, reducing the writing so everybody knows what's going on. Okay, last. Next. Okay. This is a summary of why I get involved in this complicated field. Why do this? So I want to kind of summarize thinking here. Dick pointed out that doing a good job isn't good enough to get the job done. You must communicate what you're doing and how it benefits people. so that sticking your nose to the grindstone and simply turning out a lot of good deals, that's good, but you must go to the financiers of your office and explain why institutional financing for the office is important for the long term. And describing it in terms of deals done usually doesn't cut it. So you've got to tell people what you're doing. You have to get testimonials from your licensees. If you work and get your licensee and your university jointly get money, sometimes you get testimonials of the benefit of the grant expenditure from the government agency. And so, as Dick says, you want many good deals, not a smaller number of perfect deals, because you never know how the technology will work in the hands of others. As I pointed out, the Taxol technology didn't scale. And so we had to try another technology, which Professor Holton had invented, patented, and it did scale. Everything worked out fine, as it turned out, finally. So I want to stress another idea which I touched on, which is, as a country, you want to have a vibrant knowledge exchange, tech transfer activity across the nation. It takes time to build it up. You will make mistakes. And I've pointed to American universities that had bumps in the road and then changed and learned. So it takes time. You must ask for and look for consistency over a long period of time. You must persist. This is important. So you must have such a commitment from the institution and from financiers as well. It's important to communicate. It's important as country India has such a program in order to be able to be seen as a global player contributing in this niche area of knowledge exchange and commercialization. It's one more way to show that you can contribute in the big leagues. I'm going to stop at that point. I've made my comments, and I think, Ramnath, if I might, I'm going to take a moment before answering more questions. I'm going to go back to Dick's session. There are a number of interesting questions that were asked that we didn't have time to address, which I'd like to deal with. One of the questions was from the audience, had many PhDs approach our institution to file patents? There's a lot of push to publish rather than filing patents. And so the researchers aren't quite sure what to do. They are more inclined to advance their career by publishing. How do you deal with such issues? Well, my answer is to point to the European report and point out that the leadership must stand up and explain that this is an acceptable priority. It needs to be handled carefully, needs to be budgeted and supported over the long term. Another question was, what's the ideal size of the office? The answer is it depends. Dick pointed out 2 disclosures per month per technology manager. Well, that's the starting point. You've got to have people that do the rest of the activity as well, the marketing, the negotiating, and then staff to administer deals that are done. Let's see. Oh, yeah. How do you assess the performance of the office and of the technology managers? Well, the answer I think I've shown. You want to get a number of deals done. That's one way, one component. You want to have a community of satisfied clients. And when I asked my boss what was one of the criteria, he said, John, one of my criteria of success of the office is a lack of complaints from my faculty. thought, oh, I hadn't thought of that, but that's pretty obvious for the Vice Chancellor research, that's for sure. So there was a final question from previously before we go into today's questions from that.
Mm-hmm.
How do you handle international licensing? The answer is very, very carefully with skilled outside counsel that has done this type of thing before. And for that reason, you then look into your LES professional network or your Autumn network for people who have the skill sets, have the experience, turn to them, ask for their help, or ask them to point you to others who can help you with the international licensing, because joint ownership is a legal term that is interpreted very, very differently in the United States compared to countries that are part of the Commonwealth, just as a one-off situation. So I am done. Thank you, Premnath. Thank you to the audience. And I perhaps now will take a few minutes on questions that have come up today.
Thank you. I think I'll let Pragnya first throw up the quiz, because we should first finish that and then come to the questions.
Oh, yes, of course. Thank you.
Screen, please, for the quiz QR code and the link in the chat box, please. Okay, link is here in the chat box, and for the quiz too. And here is the QR code. Maybe we can allow 2 minutes and then we can start with the question and answers. We are started getting responses now.
Okay. Shall we continue?
Yeah, we can start with the questions.
Yeah. Just before we begin the questions, I just wanted to point out that tomorrow the session is on technology, marketing, and institutional policies. We will go with, it's about 7:30. So John, I hope you have some time for addressing at least a few questions, right?
Certainly.
Yeah. And following that, my colleagues, if they have requested any of you to give some comments, that will happen post closure of the question and answers. So let me begin with a few questions. This question is from your first segment, John. Mahesh Sitagiri asks, how do you recommend TTOs balance transparency and confidentiality when communicating impact of early stage technologies? What common mistakes should TTOs avoid when communicating success stories to different stakeholders? I suppose he's also asking this in the question of confidentiality. Sometimes your licensees might request confidentiality. Sometimes there might be such requests and so on. So, yeah.
Okay, the answer is fairly straightforward. You discuss with the researcher a non-confidential summary of what's going on. And what that means is You describe the end results, but not exactly how it is accomplished. Okay? The confidentiality comes with the nuts and bolts of how things are done. So you have an executive summary, which is non-confidential. You then seek protection of the IP by copyright, by perhaps patenting. And then a company on the non-confidential summary says, I'm very interested. What do we do next? Well, we sign a confidentiality agreement, mutually confidentiality agreement, so that we can then disclose but still protect the intellectual property. And at that case, the office has to do homework. Is this company ethical and can you trust them? Have they had experience with others that has been positive, or are they ones who will talk to you for 2 years trying to understand what's going on, get free consulting, and are unwilling to sign a deal? So the confidentiality question is segmented, and you handle the information differently step by step by step until you arrive at okay, we're going to tell you everything because you've made a commitment, put some money on the table, and we move forward.
Yeah, I think that covers that question. There's a question about licensing, which I'll defer because I think that was covered in a different session. Let me just go to one question which I wanted to ask you, which is, in your experience, John, how were investment decisions on patent filings taken? And what were the criteria used? Who were involved in taking those decisions, and how were renewal and lapse decisions taken? And are there some thumb rules, some general principles that you want to recommend?
Okay, good question, because it is an expensive question. You've heard all the speakers say that roughly 50% of disclosures patent is sought. Okay, how are decisions made? First of all, usually inside the office by the licensing staff, who depend on an analysis of whether there's potential interest, or in evaluation there are kill terms such as, well, everything got published a year ago, we can't file a patent on it because it's no longer available to be patented. So experience within the office leads to decisions. Okay, so you then file nationally, and that's fairly inexpensive to get started. You then have a budget, which you obtained from the institution, and they have to be told it is an investment over the long term. Okay, so having filed, you can begin marketing, and the sophisticated company will ask to see the documentation with the patent office to understand the scope of likely allowable patent claims. Okay, they want to understand that. They want to have input, and through confidentiality agreements, you go back and forth and provide that documentation while they do the due diligence. Then you make it clear that on signing the license, the company will do two things: pay the forward-looking, going forward patent costs, not only nationally, but perhaps internationally, because they want that, and reimburse you for previous patent costs that are sunk costs. When you do a startup, you're a little more friendly and say, pay us back over, say, 3 years, you don't have the cash. If you deal with a bigger company, it's please reimburse us over the next year. Again, the decision's made inside the office. Sometimes council of the university is involved occasionally, but that's how the decisions get made. Now, you start marketing, and as Lita, Kathy point out, you might be 5 years ahead, so nobody's interested when you start marketing. What do? Well, in America, you can kill or continue a patent every year or every 3 years. Every 3 years, there's a maintenance fee. Usually, we pay that, even if we're not getting vibrant responses from the community. This is exciting technology, we pay it. 6 years out, if you're still not getting a response, we begin to question whether we should pay the maintenance fee. In most cases, we will pay it at the 6th year. Then beyond that, if there's no action, we will then terminate paying maintenance fee, which kills the patent and is a dead issue. I had one instance where a company surreptitiously went into the patent records at the patent office to find out whether we were maintaining. And when we stopped maintaining, they moved into the market. It was something that if we had maintained it, they would have infringed on our patent. We didn't know about that. So we got caught with our shorts around our ankles. So the decision is expensive. The decision is based on prior experience. Occasionally, when we were in I set up a network of directors of tech transfer across the state of Florida. And our university did about 200 million of R&D. University of Florida did about 700 million. University of Miami did about 600 million. So I would go to these directors with patent questions and ask them for their help in areas where we didn't have a lot of experience and depth in-house yet. And because we formed a cordial network and our technologies were never strictly competitive, I was able to get very useful advice and help with these decisions, which would then allow me to justify internally to either pay or not pay ongoing patent expenses. That's my answer.
Okay. I have one other question. I know there are some other questions in the chat box, but let me ask you this as well, which is when you have a deal with the licensee, how much of a say did you allow them on the jurisdictions to file in the national phase, if you had them before the national phase? And what was the deal with them for covering patent costs? And what happened if they were not interested in a domain where you had filed and were maintaining it independently?
Okay, geographical coverage of international patents. Okay, an expensive question. I mentioned when we did a spin-off company, I would file the initial stage of a PCT routinely, $4,000 or $5,000. Why? Because that gave the spin-out the option of foreign filings later with commercial partners. That was a hard asset to have, so we did that. Okay, in an ordinary license, we would put the national US patent on the table under the license, and then we talk internationally. And so we go to the company and say, what do you want to do with our technology? Well, part of that questioning was, how serious are you? Have you thought through what you're going to do? Do you have the manpower, the experience, and the resources to carry out your program? Yes or no? So if the company in a startup had to go hustle the money, I was willing to entertain covering certain costs in certain countries for a period of time to be reimbursed later. And if the company failed, I had to eat that cost. Well, we did that very judiciously. If a larger company came in and said, we want to file here, here, and here, and our researchers said, well, I happen to know that this market in a country you've not named might be very, very beneficial. Let's have that conversation. The answer to your question is, what role did the licensee play in foreign country filings? A very large role, because they would pay for it. They had a lot more market understanding than we did of what it would take to be successful in that particular market. So we listened very, very carefully. We retained ownership of all filed patents, even international filing patents, based on our technology. We fully expected the licensee to generate new technology, file new patents, and we asked for a grant back. We would like to use your new patented information in our research laboratories on campus and for educational purposes with students. Acceptable, no trouble at all. When it came to non-exclusive licensing internationally, well, that got a lot more scrutiny, not because of the cost, but because we wanted to make sure that everybody felt that they had the rights they needed, and we were not blocking people from using rights because we hadn't carefully defined it. That's my answer.
There's a question from Shweta Mishra, which is about primarily, let me read it out to you, then I'll add a few comments. How much percentage, according to you, is right for an innovator to transfer the technology and licensing it to some industry where you won't be a part of the future evolutions and progress in the product? Or else won't it be good to have an entrepreneur and going ahead and converting to a startup? Which option would you support and why? This goes back to in the impression is that in a startup environment you can have a greater role in the evolution of the technology. There's large companies, your role would probably, it will be completely out of your hands. That's a comment, right? So can you comment on whether what you think is better, both from the technology manager's perspective and the inventor's perspective?
This was a major hot topic at an autumn meeting several years ago. What do? You go with the license with a big company, or the faculty member thinks they want to do a startup, but they have no experience. What do? The community, there was probably 150 people in the room, went back and forth, until a friend of mine stood up and said, all right, enough of this. Enough of this. The answer is you do what the faculty member wants, period. And he sat down. Everybody looked at him and said, yeah, I guess that's right. Who generated the opportunity? Who was the inventor? The fact they don't know anything about startups, we spend time with them explaining the risks. But if they or postdocs or graduate students in the laboratory are willing to undertake that route, we will support them. Okay? Why? Because very quickly they realize as a startup, they have to partner with a bigger company, and all of a sudden they are talking to the bigger company who says, well, I had a chance of licensing it directly from the university. Why should I deal with you guys? And then they find that they have to justify the value that they can add. Most of the time, the big company says, okay, we'll take a sublicense. So the answer which our community has come to is this is comes in the creative mind of an inventor. Help them do what they want to do. If they go down in flaming disaster, okay, there it is. There it is. Thank you very much. You sunk costs into the patents. Everybody's experienced. And the next time someone wants to do something, you point out the experience. And many times the inventor says, well, maybe I'll license it away. I will consult for a year or two. We can jointly hunt money at our national American government, which has a pot of money specifically for joint applications from industry and universities to develop a technology. So I can stay involved, but I had one case where my contact at the company phoned me one day after a year and a half and said, John, your job is to get the inventor out of my way. Your inventor thinks they know what it's going to take to get into the marketplace. They don't know. We know. And I don't want to waste my time anymore having to explain constantly why we know what we're doing. So I had to have a meeting with the inventor who wasn't very happy about it, but realized that if this was going to go in the marketplace, which was the end game that the inventor wanted, they had to take a back seat, except when it worked. If it worked, there was a lot of glory to spread around, and the inventor was there at the front and the photo and everything else, even though everybody knew it'd been a bit of a hindrance and part of the pathway, but they were smart enough to get it out of the way at the right time. So that's my answer.
Yep. I wanted to there's a question about collaborations, which I wanted to take up next, and add to that as well. So Srividya had a question, which has got to do with how is the share of commercial value licensing decided in multi-party collaboration. So let me broaden this a little bit. Where if you have, let's take the case, for example, of two research organizations collaborating in a research project, and IP comes out of it and it is licensed. How is, what are the typical models in which both the costs and the risks and the ownership and all of that is shared?
All right. The response is multifaceted, given the exact details of who's involved. But there are some general rules. First is, okay, a piece of intellectual property is created, it needs to be protected. You ask those companies interested in protecting it, and one hand goes up. I'm interested. I'll pay for it. Mm-hmm. Anyone else? No, we're not interested. It then it moves to a point of licensing, and it gets licensed. And the other companies say, well, I want a piece of the action. And the first company says, sorry, you had an opportunity to participate in the risky stage of financing the patent. You declined. Thank you very much. You may participate from the smaller portion of the royalties that go to the collaborative group. Okay. So you can get a piece of that, but you can't get a piece of the direct cash flow because you weren't willing to take the risk early on. Okay. You then have two licenses for different markets, one of which is incredibly successful, and the other of which is not. And so you look at them, and the second one, where it wasn't successful, says, well, I like a piece of the successful action. And the answer is, well, you did take a risk in the market you wanted. So you can benefit from the portion that goes to the collaborative group. But in addition, because you collaborated with me, the successful licensee, you told me why your market was not responding, why it didn't work in your market. And that was valuable to me with a successful license. So I'm prepared to give you a small piece of the royalty cash flow, something that gets decided when that conversation occurs because of the benefit of that knowledge of why it didn't work in a certain market. So again, you got to sit down, got to be people of good trust, good faith to bring the topic up on the table, talk about it depending on how others have done it elsewhere, outside your country, inside your country, learn from that, and then figure something out that you think makes sense. At the end of the day, there is an issue that no one had anticipated. You just got to sit down and negotiate and work it out.
My final question for today, John, I'll go back to just joint development with industry. How do you manage IP in those cases where, say, industry and your academic inventor are collaborating? It's a joint technology development. There are inventors from both sides, and there is an agreement that is signed between the two parties. Do you have any recommendations, any thoughts on that, please?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. You look at where the invention occurs geographically. Two collaborators, one in New York, one in Florida, the academics in Florida. The invention happens in the Florida laboratory. Okay? Mm-hmm. Even though there's input from the New York company, the invention happens there. So it's owned by Florida State, say. Okay? But immediately licensed non-exclusively to the New York company. And then the New York company has absolutely got the first right to an exclusive business license worldwide. Okay? Mm-hmm. But it's owned by FSU. Okay? Mm-hmm. Say. Another example. Had this happen, a small company places an employee inside the university's laboratory. They contribute as an inventor, but also as an employee. Okay.
Mhm.
So that individual gets the employee's portion of a royalty. It goes to them privately, okay, as an employee. Their employer, the company, is informed of what's going on, and they say, well, we want a piece of the royalty as well because we made that person available. We paid their salary. You didn't pay the salary. And so you sit down and say, okay, that's a fair question. Let us look at dividing up so that you benefit from the risk you took of paying for your person to be in our laboratory where they made an inventive contribution. So the answer is probably no two cases are the same. There's some general rules that you can apply, but then you have to sit down and put the facts on the table and negotiate a solution that people are equally uncomfortable with, so that no one feels, I got a great deal out of that, but yeah, I can live with that. And the other side says, yeah, I can live with it. Okay, well then that's a reasonable, good deal to sort out that problem.
Thank you, John. I think with that, we'll wind up for today. Really
Okay.
appreciate you taking the time and sharing your wisdom and your experience with all of us. So I'll hand over to Pragnya. Thanks a lot. And I think you're having a very bright, sunny morning in Utah today.
Oh yeah, let me explain where Utah is to your audience. They may not know. We used to live in Washington, D.C. And if you draw a straight line from Washington, D.C. to San Francisco in California, 2/3 of the way across, you run into the Rocky Mountains, and there are three lines of mountains. 2/3 of the way along that line is the state of Utah. That's where I am. Okay, we're 2 hours behind the East Coast, 1 hour ahead of the West Coast, and we're in the western portion of the middle of the United States, halfway between the Canadian border and the Mexican border, just for people's information. The sun has come up. Actually, we're in the Colorado River Valley on the Colorado Plain. And if I could show you the outside, you'd see the river valley 1,000 feet high on two sides of the city, okay? With the river in the middle, which has eroded over a long time. So when the sun comes up, the sky is bright, but you don't see the sun for at least an hour until it gets over the edge of the river valley. Just a small piece of trivia for your audience. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, Pragnya.
Thank you, Mr. Fraser, for very interesting sessions on understanding and communicating the impact of TTOs, training and excelling as tech transfer professionals, intellectual property management for tech transfer professionals, and the case studies, interesting case studies, which you showed, especially the music one. It could not have been a better timing. We are having World IP Day on 26th April, and the theme is music. So thanks for that. Can we have slides on the screen, please, for tomorrow's session? We'll be closing Mr. Fraser's session here. And if we can have the slides for tomorrow, which we have already told you, we'll have Dr. Premnath, Dr. Anuradha Narasimhan, and Dr. Arvind Chinchure, who would be speaking about technology marketing, which is very important aspect of doing the licensing and deal making. Then overview of enabling policies, and they would be also covering, Dr. Premnath and Dr. Anu, they would be also covering very important aspect of technology marketing and about the technology, and that is value proposition. How to derive value proposition, why is it important? They would be explaining it using examples. So request all of you to join tomorrow for the last day of these 5-day seminar series. Thank you so much.